Hi everyone, thank you for joining me on my first YouTube tutorial for 3D printing. My name is Shannon and I am from Vogel 3D Crafts. Today I'm going to be going over some ways to reduce your purge waste in multicolor printing. I'm using Bambu Studio because I have a few Bambu printers, so just linking to the printers is a lot easier. A lot of this should apply to other multicolor printers and slicers. You just might need to adjust your numbers a little bit. So first I'm going to talk about the prime tower, which a lot of people are misinformed when they start printing, and some people call it a purge tower, or sorry, yeah, purge tower, but it's a prime tower. It does purge a little bit. If you actually click on it in Bambu Studio, it explains that it does purge old color and it ensures smooth color transition. So the color transition and the flow rate of the filament is really where you need the prime tower. And it is helpful for multicolor printing. If you don't use it, sometimes you'll get little extra bits of filament stuck to your print. So I highly recommend having it on during multicolor printing, especially with everything I'm going to show you in this video. So right here I have one of my models, cute little girl duck, and we're going to see how much waste it's going to make. I have my 0.12 layer height profile set. It does say articulated. Since I'm not doing an articulated model, you could lower the wall loops a little bit. I'm going to keep it at 3 for a couple reasons, which I'll go over later. So at 0.12 layer height, with all these color changes, it's going to be 196.56 grams of waste. And the model itself is only 26.64. So it's a lot more waste than there is model. We don't want that. So there's a few ways that you can reduce waste. The first one I'm going to go over, technically not reducing the waste itself, but I'm going to fill the bed with copies. So I think I can fit 16 ducks on the plate. And if I slice it, it should be the same exact amount of waste. Yep, I believe that's the same, 196.56. But if I take that number and divide it by the 16 ducks that we have, I'm doing that on my calculator right now, that's 12.285. So, round it up, 12.26 per duck. So if you just printed one duck, you're going to get almost 200 grams of waste. If you print a full plate of the ducks, you're going to get 200 grams of waste, but you get a lot more ducks out of it. So if you know you're going to be using a lot of the same thing, like if you do sales and you want to have a bunch of stuff in stock, it's definitely better to do it all at once. Another thing that we can do, which I'm going to delete all but one, and I'm going to flush into the infill. And so we're going to take that original 196 and see how much that reduces by. It's not going to be a lot at all, but we'll see later once you're doing a whole plate and reducing. So it took away about 1 gram of waste. So if we do a full plate of them, it should take about 16 grams of waste away. So we're down to 184.55, so that took away about 12 grams. Again, that's not a lot, but you know, every little bit counts if you just have piles of this printer poop laying around. I know some people put it into molds and melt it and make new things out of it. I actually kind of store mine for a while, and then when I have a good amount, I'll ship it out to the people who do stuff like that for free if they just pay the shipping. And then, you know, it can be used again, and I don't have to worry about just tossing plastic. So right now I have it set at 0.12 layer height, but when I do my multicolor prints, I actually do 0.16. So this is my profile that I use for that. I think my prime tower is a little smaller on this profile. So if I have them all purged to infill and a higher layer height, that means less color changes with less layers. Same amount of height for the model itself, but because each layer is 0.04 millimeters higher, overall, it's less layers. So we now went down from 196.5 to 133.4 just from changing the layer height. Like I said, when I do multicolor printing, I do 0.16. A lot of people go up to the 0.2 layer height that's standard with the 0.4 nozzle. I just like a slightly smoother looking model, so I try not to go over 0.16. If you're doing a model that doesn't have as many rounded features like this one does, you could probably get away with the 0.2 and then reduce that even more. So if you look inside, you'll see a little bit of purge throughout the model. Again, that's only getting rid of a little bit. So there's some ways that you can reduce even more. If you're really worried about just getting rid of the waste altogether, first is the flushing volumes. Automatically in Bambu Studio, the multiplier is going to be set to 1. I used to be able to get away with, like, you know, 0.45 to 0.6 multiplier, but after they changed some things in Bambu Studios and did a few updates, I'm usually safer around 0.7 to 0.8. So I'm going to do 0.75 just as an example. You can go in and individually change these numbers. So you'll see, you know, obviously you're not changing from black to black. When you're changing from black to white, this number's higher because the program knows that the black is going to bleed into the white really badly, so it purges out more going from black to white as it would going from white to black, or, you know, say blue to pink. So a lot of people will mess with the numbers individually. I've seen people say that they try and do, like, going from black to white, like 450 at least. I don't personally mess with the individual numbers, but you can definitely look up what values are good for certain colors and everything. So I'm going to leave that at 0.75 and see how much more that took off. So we started at 196, and then by going up in layer height and having purged to infill, we ended up around 133. And now we're at 98, so we've reduced 100 grams almost just by changing the flushing volumes and doing purge to infill. So if I take that 98.11 and divide that by the 16 ducts we have, that's just over 6 grams of waste per duct. So something else that is a personal tip of mine is using matte filaments a lot, especially with the white. And these are all set to basic at the moment. But doing the Bambu matte filaments, I know that this shade of pink in particular is only a matte. with bamboo. And there is ice blue. So changing a few of these. Let's go with the basic brown. I always use basic black. There's a basic orange. So I want to see if this actually changes the purge amount, which it did not. It actually went up, possibly because I actually put in real colors. They were set to basic before, and the colors didn't actually match the basic filaments. They matched the matte filaments. Might have something to do with me updating my slicer, but it will help a bit with the bleeding, in my opinion. Going from the black to white, still the same number, I believe. But I have noticed that, you know, matte filaments are a little more opaque. They've got different additives and pigments in them. So I found that you don't see through, especially with doing less walls, which was why I kept it at 3. If you do purge to infill, sometimes, especially with those basic filaments that are a little bit translucent, you'll end up seeing these darker color changes through like the white or the yellows in particular. So that's one of the reasons that I like using matte filaments, because then I can still purge to infill and reduce that waste a little bit. That's definitely a personal preference because of how little waste purging to infill actually saves. You know, that's kind of negligible. You can use whatever filaments you like. Just make sure that if you're doing purge to infill, you're doing more walls. Like you might even want to do 4 walls so you're not seeing that filament through there. So again, I'm going to get rid of all but one. And I want to talk about purging into other items. So I've got some shapes over here. And you'll see people saying that the purge item should be as tall as your last color change. So with this model, it's going to be right around here, and then there's still going to be some pink. So, you know, this is taller, but the cone doesn't have a lot of meat right here. You know, it goes to almost nothing. So we're going to see purge into this object, which a lot of people ask, you know, why don't you also click flush into infill? When you do flush into this object, it flushes into the infill as well. So it's just, you know, one less click. You can do it or you don't have to. So that brought us to 118 from, I believe, the 133-ish with no extra ducks. We've got the purge to infill on the duck, and then we're purging into this little cone. But you see where it's, you know, starting to purge the brown and pink. There's, you know, there's nothing here. So you would either want a taller model or something that, like this rectangle, has more to it. So we're going to flush to this and then see how much more we can reduce that by. So this is 114 now versus, how much was this? 118. So that was an extra 4 grams with the cube. And then even going to this more rounded cone, there's still a bit more material here. So the regular cone was 118, and let's see how much this one is. So this is 117. So even that little bit of difference with the different shape and having more area for the filament to purge, you're reducing more waste. So, you've got options. And obviously you're not going to be purging into random shapes. You're going to be purging into other models. But I see a lot of people using, like, say I have, this model is almost 70 millimeters tall, and I'll see people using fidgets that are low on the plate and wouldn't even reach the color changes, and they don't understand that it can't purge into that because they're not thinking about the fact that the print goes layer by layer and it doesn't go back down to purge filament later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill the plate again. And then let's remember how much waste that was. So that's at 107. And I'm actually going to delete a couple of these. And I'm going to bring over my little ghost model. And again, flush into this object. And I'm going to do 2 of them. So let's see how much that is now. All right, so that brought it down to 87. So that's a significant chunk of filament waste eliminated. Something that I personally like to do is make sure my whole plate is filled with stuff. Sometimes if I didn't want a bunch of these ducks, I might just fill it up with other ghosts or different models. Like I might have like 3 different models and a couple of each to purge into. And then in the end, I usually just end up painting the eyes on like the articulated animals and stuff that I'm purging into. With this heart ghost, I might paint the heart too. But if you have a model that's lower down to start, you can definitely use those fidgets like air spinners, infinity cubes. People love that kind of thing when I sell them at my booth. They like all the different stripy colors. And it eventually, playing around with it, you can possibly get, under 50, under 10 with smaller models. Like if I reduced this by 60% or to 60%, and then let's also make this guy smaller. Let's do 12 of them total. And we'll do 4 of these guys. And see how much waste that is. And just another tip while this is loading is to not do multiple, like different models that have color changes in different spots. So, like if I had my ducks on the plate and then I had something else that had color changes underneath, that would just add more color changes. So it would be best to do that other model on its own separate plate, like with its own purge items and settings and everything. So that's just under 40 grams of waste. And the plate is not nearly full. So imagine, these ducks here were a little short dragon, and you could put 3 of those dragons on the plate and then still fill it up with some other purge items, and you could have almost no waste. So definitely try playing around with it, seeing what works for you, what items you want to print. If you don't want to have extra articulated animals that are stripy, or you like, maybe a pen holder or something, just try and reduce what you can with just messing with the flushing volumes, switching filament colors if you have something similar. And if you don't mind reusing the waste, then you can go that route too. So I think those are all of my tips and tricks for waste reduction. I'd love to hear what else you'd like to know, especially in Bambu Studio. I've got a couple more ideas for videos coming up. So let me know what you think, and thank you for watching.